All right, in this video, pretty obviously, we're going to be talking about the car paint shader. What we've got here is a model of a nice Lamborghini, and this shader that's on it, there's actually just a couple shaders here. There's one for the glass, one for the tires, and everything else just has a gray shader on it. I wanted to really just talk about the car paint shader in particular here. The way the scene is set up, is just quite simply a black plane with a giant softbox. That softbox has a nice softbox texture on it as well. All right, so let's first start out. We saw the render there. I want to just kind of bring it up to discuss, so hopefully this comes through in nice enough quality that you can see this detail. But the car paint shader is made up of 3 layers. There's the clear coat layer, which gets this nice sharp reflection. There's the base diffuse color, which has its own actually slightly glossy material. And then there's a third layer for this flake. You can see this nice kind of glittery effect across the paint. It's definitely something that really nice cars have. You would see it less on a cheaper car. So let's go ahead, and I'm just going to start by assigning, a regular V-Ray material to this. I'm just going to turn up our reflection amount, and we can really just kind of see what the difference is. Let's get our IPR going here. We'll do IPR in this little area here. And you can see it's really, it's those layers of reflection that really make the car paint so nice. And you can create this yourself through a V-Ray blend material, and that's totally fine, of course, but I do prefer to do it in the car paint material because the layers are going to be balanced against one another. And all the settings are already there for you. The flake is dialed in. The default values are actually not half bad. So, there's nothing against making your own shader, but, if you're in a production and you're kind of far away, you're really not going to need the flake. If you're working with a lower end car, then again, you also may not need that flake layer, and you may be able to get away with simply having a layered shader. But that's really going to be up to you. But let's discuss the car paint shader in a little bit more depth here. So I'm just going to assign this body of the car here a new material. Oops. And this new material, we're just going to select our V-Ray car paint. And let's see what this looks like just going in and rendering the default. There we go. Pretty interesting. So you can see the dialing that I went in and did on this other material here. But just looking at this here, you can see that the flake has to get dialed in specifically. And 2, the rest of the color got adjusted. So let's just kind of make a new shader here. Work on this new shader. And we can look at some of these settings. So in the top section of this shader, we've got our base color, base glossiness, and base reflection. So something I like to do when I'm going in and whenever I'm first working on a new shader I've never seen before even, is go in and dial these parameters one by one. So I'm actually going to set the flake density just simply to 0 right now so I can get rid of it. And I'm just going to set my clear coat strength to 0. So now what I'm looking at is my base color and my base reflection, which is pretty cool. So you can see I can dial, if I wanted a little bit less glossiness, reflection on that base coat, I can take that completely out. You can, if you were to dial this darker, you can start seeing, it looks like we're still getting some sort of clear coat reflection. There it was. So actually, even though I had our clear coat at 0, it was still grabbing some of that. So we can, we'll set this back to 0.05 on the strength, and we'll just set the coat color to black. So there we go. So now we can really just see what this reflection is like on that underlying color here. So you can see that there's no Fresnel values. All of that stuff is pre-established, which is cool. Again, it kind of adds to the ease of use of this shader. So as you dial that reflection, that reflection color up on this base, you can see that it darkens down the diffuse by quite a bit. So that default value, I think it was around 0.5 or so, and we can just kind of dial that. We can bring back in our diffuse color. Maybe we'll make this one like a nice, like a nice orange. Cool. Maybe a little more red in that. There we go. Cool. Yep. And that's looking pretty cool. So now I can go in and, I can, maybe if I wanted to keep this feeling a little glossier, I can still sharpen that main reflection layer if I want to. I'm actually usually pretty happy with the look of the base values in this car paint shader. So maybe we can dial down a reflection a little bit. And it is pretty important to really get that clear coat back on. That clear coat adds quite a bit to your shader, and you can see how they're interacting now with the clear coat sitting on top of that nice, softer, glossy underneath. So I can uncheck the flake as well. And so to be honest, this by itself without the flake, before we get into that, is totally great for a shader. If you wanted to get a little fancier, you could go in on the base color and you could map a V-Ray Fresnel 2D texture. And you could say, let's do like the front color being red and then the side color being that nice orange that we had. So that we get that, you can see that nice just, and again, this is more of a sports car kind of thing, but you get the idea that we can still get a really nice shader. It's kind of just a built-in V-Ray blend shader for car paint. And this can be used also for other things too, like robots or transformer kind of stuff. If you're doing a character and they've got like fancy futuristic armor, you could do something kind of like this where it's like enameled feeling. You can see also if I start turning up that base reflection amount, it's going to darken down that diffuse and make it feel a little bit more metallic and metal, which is kind of nice too, which is pretty cool. So you can also see, so we'll turn this back down so it feels a little bit more diffused. There we go. And now we can start discussing some of the flake. So the flake on this object is a little interesting. So on this guy, I just got this off the internet. And so let's go ahead and look at how I have done the UV. So I actually had to spread the UVs out across 16 tiles. And I just did a really quick automatic map because this didn't have UVs. And I always get better results using the explicit mapping type on the flake. So you do have a option to do a triplanar projection, but to me it always looks a little softer and it's harder to dial in. So let's take a look and we'll get our flake turned back on here. And first thing I want to do is turn my density back up. And I actually like to do this a lot where I have a contrasting color so I can really see what the flake is doing. And then at the very end, I'll go in and dial it. So for this one, maybe we'll do like a nice yellow to kind of mix in over top of that red and orange color. So immediately here, we've got these three values, which are fairly important. So we've got the flake scale, which if you imagine the flake just over a 1024 by 1024 map that's mapped across your whole object, imagine the scale just dialing that up and down. So the scale can be the space in between. So if I set my scale down to like 0.005, you can see that there's less space in between those dots. The density kind of does the same thing. So you can start playing around with all of these. So if they all kind of work together, but in generally speaking, what I like to do is using a nice small size. Maybe we'll even go down to like 0.1. And you can see now, if I was to dial my density up to the max, which is 20, we can see what that does. Starting to take a little bit longer. You can see there's actually still, even with the density that high, from far away here, I can still kind of see some little gaps and stuff in between. So it's really not, I really need to take that scale even lower. So I'm going to take the scale down to 0.001. And we'll see what that looks like. Cool. So see, now I'm starting to get this kind of like bluish sheen. And it kind of has this, has that little bit of a glittery feel to it, which is exactly what I wanted. And if I was to zoom in here, so let's stop that IPR. And I will go ahead and save this file out. So what I like to do is really just, get pretty close in here and look at an area of your model where you can see, this is kind of cool because I'll be able to see the back here, as well as what's happening up front. So we can start that IPR. There you go. You can see, let's bring this over. So there's quite a bit of these flakes now, which is looking pretty nice. And, maybe I'm not really going to be able to get my density any lower, or sorry, my density any higher. I'm already maxed out at 20. And on top of that, if I look at my shader here, my scale is also pretty much as low as it'll go. So in this situation, that's when you have to start expanding your UVs a little bit. Just depending on how your object is UV'd, how much of it you're looking at, you may realize that you need to expand this into additional tiles. So for now, though, I think you can also even try. So I think you can take this scale a little lower than 0.001. So I can say 0.0005. And I believe that that'll still, that should update in 1 second here. And we will, even though it snaps that to yeah, exactly. So even though it snaps that to 0.001, you can see there is an even denser amount of flake in there. So that's feeling pretty nice. And, if I wanted to, I could lower the size a little bit. But if I lower the size, it's going to start creeping in some area in between that, which I don't necessarily want. All right. So there's a couple other parameters here we haven't talked about yet. So the flake orientation is you can imagine if this value was set to 0, every single flake is, accepting the normal of the object. So that means that your flake glossiness value, that reflection from this flake, is actually very closely going to match a normal glossiness value. One of the really amazing parts of this flake procedural is actually this orientation where it will change the normal. And so you can get a little bit more spottiness in that flake. So you can see if I'll leave that right there. I'll draw another box right next to it right here. And on this box, I'll set this up to like 0.6. I'll let that think for a second here. And you can see actually we lost some of it. But what you'll see is in some other areas, it will start getting some darker spots. So that's kind of a nice, it's much more apparent to you if I increase the size here a little bit. You'll actually start seeing some, actually that's kind of cool. Yeah, it's a little bit different. So if I bring this back down 0.4, this will have even more of that area of flake. So now even more of them are catching that highlight, whereas down here only a few of them are pointed in that direction so that they catch that highlight. So it's pretty cool. And they're feeling a little thick if I, just glancing at it. So I may want to, now that I'm feeling pretty good about this, I want to probably back my camera back to where my actual shot is going to be. Get my... you notice I'm hitting stop and there's a bit of a delay. That's because I do have render elements on. Before I turn them off, if you really quickly want to see how this works, so you can see there's my raw lighting. My reflection does have all three layers together. And then lastly, we have our specular, and specular tends to be a little bit more focused on those glossy reflections because they're catching the actual specular from the light. So to get rid of that delay, I'm just going to go over to my render elements here, and I'm just going to temporarily disable them. Cool. And then I'm going to go back over my shot cam here and restart my IPR from the shot cam, and we'll finish. We'll come to a final size for that flake. So from far away, that's actually feeling, that density and that little bit of bigger size is feeling pretty cool. So I can keep that. If you want it to be a little more sparse, that's pretty easy to do just by lowering the size. But before I really fine tune that size, I do want to make sure I go in here and I want to make sure I go in and get the color feeling closer to my actual paint material here. So maybe we'll just try yellow to start. We can see what that looks like. So you can see it's a really, right now there's quite a bit of them. And if I lower that size down, you can see how beautiful, totally amazing. If I lower that size a little bit, it will start to get a bit sparser. Yeah, so immediately, because I lowered the size, there's a lot less of that yellow kind of coming through, and it feels a little bit nicer. So you can see I've got it almost feels a little bit tiled right now, so maybe I have my UVs a little bit too scaled up. Another thing you can try is actually changing the last parameter we haven't really talked about yet here is the flake map size. So you can kind of see there's a ever so subtle, just kind of repeating pattern down in there. And so if I increase this size to 2048, and just so you know, I would be careful going above 2048 on complex models, or if you have multiple UV tiles like I do here. That does start to really increase your memory usage because it's essentially calculating the flake and saving it out to a 2D texture. And actually, yes, you can see that's feeling a little bit nicer. Got rid of some of that. It did change. I think I saved it here, so this is the A right here. And so it just kind of, it feels a bit more random, which is what we're looking for, which is nice. So this is the B on this side, and then that's the A where it feels a little blotchier almost, whereas the A starts, smoothing some of it out. So we'll keep it at that 2048 size. And maybe I can kind of split the difference, as they say, with that size, because I want a little bit more of that yellow to come back. So we'll say 1.25, and that number will be pretty sensitive as you start really showing that flake sitting on top of the rest of your objects. The rest of the reflection. So, and you can see how long this is actually still calculating in the IPR because it's now having to send that back through that flake map, which is higher res. I've got a whole lot of flake. So cool, that's actually looking pretty nice though. Kind of a nice balance. And you can also even go in and you can map a V-Ray Fresnel to the flake color if you wanted to. I'm actually pretty happy with this, so I'm not going to, but just know that is a mappable attribute. And if you for some reason maybe your camera is getting really close to an object for a second and you just are exposing a bit of the flake that feels kind of weird, you do have a seed down here. If you want to reorder the randomness in a different way, you can, if you need to, you've got that available to you. So that's it, really. It's a very powerful shader. And again, you can use it for things other than car paint. You know, maybe if there's like a, I don't know, like a KitchenAid mixer, like kind of enameled appliance of some kind, you could use it for that. And also do know that this shader is still fully workable in a blend shader. So just as an example, if I was to go in and graph this shader, and let's create our V-Ray blend material, I can make this the base, and I could map in a V-Ray material. So maybe this car was all dirty. We'll make this kind of a like brownish, dirty, whatever kind of color. And that can be my coat material. And you can, you know, then hold this out. So let's create a just a 2D noise texture. And you can see that's mostly black, or sorry, mostly white, which is kind of what I want. And this is going to look pretty awful, but we can just at least for what we're doing here, it'll work okay. And I'm just going to control middle click drag to switch that shading group connection, default connection. And now we can see what that looks like. Turn back on our IPR. Also, because you can see, you know, how much longer the IPR is taking to start back up, definitely feel free to keep that map size a little bit lower until you really need to increase it to that 2048 final size. Like I could definitely go in and set that size to 1024 for now. But yeah, so there you go. Pretty ugly, but you know, hopefully it just proves as a proof of concept that you could definitely go in and do some pretty cool stuff with this. Maybe if I just grab a file texture instead, we can make this look a little bit nicer. Bring my node editor back over here. So let's see if we've got a nice like tileable grunge texture. I think we do from the materials section. So let's go up to scratches. Yeah, I mean, even any of these will probably work. Oh, here's our grunge. That'll work. We'll try that instead. And we can see, you know, this is UV based, of course, but we can definitely see the result that we get here. Just to have some fun with it. We'll let that load up. There you go. Pretty cool. Definitely, it feels a little bit more dirt-like now, which is nice. And so that's our car paint multiplied in through a blend material, which is pretty nice looking. So this file will be saved out. It may not come with the model. It's only going to be the shaders. So when you open this file, all of these shaders that we just made will be in there, including the blue car paint material. And you can go online, you can find all sorts of good car models to play around with this shader with. So cool. On to the next shader.